Our first scripture reading is from Genesis chapter 16, verses 7 to 13. Genesis 16, verses 7 to 13. The angel of the Lord found Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? She said, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to Hagar, I will so greatly multiply your offspring that they cannot be counted for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, now you have conceived and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael, for the Lord has given heed to your affliction. He shall be a wild ass of a man, with his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he shall live at odds with all of his kin. So she named the Lord who spoke to her, you are Elroy. For she said, have I really seen God and remained alive after seeing him? This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The next reading this morning comes from the Gospel according to Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. What page are we on? Okay, a man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he couldn't because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree to see Jesus because he was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. I must stay at your house today. So Zacchaeus hurried down and was happy to welcome Jesus. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he's gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay them back 4 times as much. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and save the lost. This is the word of the Lord. I don't know, we have a lot of different cultures and backgrounds with us today. So I don't know if this is familiar to you, but I can't. Good morning, Gary. I cannot sing or hear this passage without hearing in my head, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. Anybody else? He climbed up in a sycamore tree. The Lord he wanted to. The Lord said, Zacchaeus, you need to. Okay. Even if you don't know the song, we have been reading Luke long enough that you have probably some ideas where this whole story might be going. Luke introduces Zacchaeus as a chief tax collector and a rich person. Remember just last week when we read Luke's Beatitudes and it said, woe to you who are rich? Remember that? We know that for Luke, money is a dangerous thing. It can be something that keeps us from trusting and knowing God. Now add to that Zacchaeus is a tax collector and things get kind of bad. As much as we might dislike the IRS, at least our taxes pay for things in our government that we have some say in electing. Yeah? At the time of Jesus, Jericho, where he was passing through, and all of Israel were occupied by Rome. So Zacchaeus, who had been a Jewish person like Jesus and the disciples, who had taken a job with the overlords, with the Romans, making sure that his own people were paying the really, really high taxes that went to pay for Caesar's palace, and maybe the army. He was a collaborator, stealing the little that people had from them, his own people. Some Bible scholars actually think the phrase where it says he was short in stature, some Bible scholars think that actually was kind of metaphor, that he was low in public opinion. That maybe he couldn't see Jesus walking because the crowd would not part to let him by. His own people wanted nothing to do with him. He was the source of pain and hunger, literal hunger and oppression in their lives. Knowing all of this, it's easy to jump to the end of the story and to show that Zacchaeus was a good rich person, right? That Luke was lightening up a little bit on those of us who've got stuff. Maybe this story is just about the importance of welcoming all people to the table, no matter how evil their actions have been. A couple of weeks ago, for those of you who weren't here, we talked about the story of the 10 people with leprosy. Do you know that one? They are all healed by Jesus, and they go on their way to show themselves to the priest, to be declared that they are clean, they can go back to their families and their communities and their jobs. And as they're going, one of them, it says, saw that he had been healed. And because he saw that he was healed, he returned to Jesus to praise him and to thank him. We talked about how sometimes in our lives we don't always praise or thank God for the good things because we don't always take the time to see them. In the story of Zacchaeus, there's a moment we often skip over. In our haste to get to the end when the rich guy is not so bad, one moment when the whole trajectory of the story changes, when Zacchaeus' life is changed forever. It's in verse 5 when Jesus arrives at the sycamore tree that Zacchaeus has climbed, and he looks up. There are a lot of things that Jesus could have seen in that tree. He could have seen a crazy rich guy who thought he deserved a higher seat. He could have seen a tax collector collaborating with the colonial rulers, taking more money than he should from his own people. He could have seen a short guy trying to get a better view. But Jesus saw Zacchaeus. Jesus saw how desperately this man was trying to connect. Jesus saw the moral conflicts in his heart. Jesus saw a child of God. And because Jesus saw him, Zacchaeus' life was changed forever. Long before the moment when Jesus looks up and sees a short man who had climbed a tree, there was somebody else who God saw. Caroline read a part of her story this morning. Her name was Hagar. She was a slave belonging to the household of Abraham and Sarah. God had promised Abraham that he would have descendants as numerous as the grains of sand on the beach. You remember that? But he and Sarah were old, and they didn't have any kids yet, so they were starting to get worried. There was a custom in their culture at the time that the slave women could become wives of their masters, and so Sarah gets the idea that maybe Abraham should, kind of give it a try with her. And long story short, the plan works. Hagar becomes pregnant. But as Sarah sits and watches this woman who used to work for her gain power and influence in the family, she gets jealous. She starts to treat Hagar with cruelty at any chance that she gets. And Abraham, for all the good things the Bible says about him, doesn't seem to want to get involved in what he calls a fight between women. He tells Sarah, do whatever you want with her. Hagar, suffering in this situation that was caused by no action of her own, doesn't know what to do. She thinks that getting away from this terrible household must be the best option. even if the only place to run to is the desert. So she leaves. Some of us can imagine what it was like for Hagar. What it was like to be so afraid in our own home that leaving, whether to a new family, a new country, felt like the only safe option. For those of us who have suffered abuse, who have lived in fear, who have woken up under the weight of depression, who have witnessed unspeakable violence, it can be easy to feel that we're going unseen. We must be worthless, disposable. We can understand how Hagar must have felt alone in the desert, pregnant, camped out by a spring of water. Just when an angel of God appears to her and tells her what? That God has seen her affliction. And this angel gives her a gift, telling her that her descendants will be so numerous they won't be able to be counted. The same promise given to Abraham. And Hagar is so moved by this encounter that she finds the strength to return to the pain of her life, the hope to face what she had felt was insurmountable. But before she goes, she does something powerful, something audacious. She names God. She says, "You are El Roi, the God who sees." Hagar was a slave woman. She had no great possessions or wealth. All she had to offer in response to God's love in her life was herself. But God's love for her, even in the middle of a hopeless situation, was so strong that she turned around and she faced her reality with renewed strength and gratitude. Now, Zacchaeus, on the other hand, was quite wealthy. He had a lot of resources with which to serve God. And when he climbed down the tree and took Jesus back to his house for dinner, he too was moved with gratitude for the God who sees. Jesus had not only seen him, but had acknowledged the desire of Zacchaeus' heart to be in a relationship with him. And out of gratitude for being seen, like Hagar, Zacchaeus turns around too. He turns his life around. He gave away, it says, half of everything he had. And he pledged to pay back anyone who he had cheated 4 times what they were owed. Do you have an experience, a story you would tell about a time that you were really seen? I do. My husband and I, some of you know, celebrated our 11th wedding anniversary this summer, but we have known each other forever and ever. So long, in fact, that people often say, when did you fall in love? When did you know this was the person? And I tell a story of being 16 years old in a friend's parents' house, talking on a Saturday night, and telling the story of my life. I have a sister who was born with a disability, and a lot of my childhood was structured around taking her to appointments, making sure she was safe, making sure she had what she needed, making sure I didn't rock the boat. And as I told the story to Dan, he said, "Wow, what was that like for you?" Nobody ever asked me that. You know, everything I did was taken for granted. But he saw me. Changed my life. In an important way, for sure, but in the way that I began to understand my own value, my own dignity and worth as God's child. Do you have an experience that you would tell about a time that you were really seen? Maybe you do, or maybe you don't, but I think we probably all have had experiences of feeling unseen, right? Of doing our best day in and day out without any acknowledgement. of enduring cruelty from the people around us without any complaint, of working and striving so hard to reach our goals only to fall short again. Friends, if you feel like Hagar today, in the middle of the desert, trying to escape and not knowing where to go next, God sees you. If you feel like Zacchaeus, not sure how to do what is right, but desperate to live in a relationship with God and with your neighbor, God sees you. Whatever your path, wherever you find yourself today, God sees you. And if it's anything like the way it feels when a 17-year-old boy takes notice of your struggling heart, friends, it is a wonderful thing to be seen. There were some people, and some of Jesus' own people, who didn't get this, who didn't think that Zacchaeus deserved to get Jesus' attention. But Jesus reminds them all that Zacchaeus too is a child of Abraham. In other words, Jesus tells them God didn't just make a covenant with you and with the people that you really like. God made a covenant with all of us. The God who sees is the God of our hearts. The God who loves and cherishes us no matter what, who forgives us more times than we can mess up, who pledges to stand by us even in the valley of the shadow of death. And if that doesn't make us thankful, I'm not sure what will. So how will we today respond to being seen? What will we give to the God who sees? Like the 9 other people who were cured of their leprosy, will we even notice? Or will we, like Zacchaeus, like Hagar, be so strengthened by the love and compassion of our God that we find ourselves turning around with renewed hope for our lives and a changed commitment to use what we have to serve God and others? How will we say thank you to the God who sees?